You guys are good? Everybody's good? All right. Good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mayor Eric Garcetti, and I'm so excited to be here with the Avengers, state and local officials who are the superheroes of this fight of our life to house Californians and to end homelessness in our lifetimes. And I want to thank, first and foremost, I keep wanting to say newly re-elected, but newly reaffirmed governor. Los Angeles is very proud to knock down the distracting and expensive ridiculousness of the recall to get us back to 100% focus on the urgent work at hand. And we are here today in a board and care facility, something that I know our county, and you'll hear in a minute from the chair of our County Board of Supervisors, and our governor and legislators have been focused on. Because even here in Los Angeles, as yesterday we broke ground on the largest permanent supportive housing structure ever built here in Los Angeles, if not in the country. Even as we open up tiny home villages and surpass our wildest goals for new congregate shelters, clear and house people out of places like Venice Beach, Echo Park, and elsewhere, we are still seeing too many people go into homelessness. And we know that if we build 100 new units of housing, but we lose 100 bedrooms at board and cares, we won't win this fight. So it is fitting that we are here today looking and focusing on the humanitarian crisis of homelessness. Governor Newsom, a man who has been a mayor, who has staked his career on the fight against homelessness, Lourdes Castro Ramirez, the Secretary of Business, Consumer Affairs and Housing Agency, and a great Angelino who serves in the cabinet, Dr. Mark Galli, the Secretary of Health and Human Services Agency, as well as the extraordinary chair of our Board of Supervisors, Hilda Solis, Assembly members Luz Rivas and Jesse Gabriel, our state senator, Marilena Durazo, and other incredible folks. This is a board and care that currently provides housing for 36 individuals and turns around the help and hope of their lives. We remember just a few years ago marching up to visit with the governor's predecessor, and I think we can say because the statute of limitations has expired. Jerry Brown said privately to 11 mayors, well, you know, homelessness is really a local concern. But we were diligent, we found the right partners in the legislature, and we passed $500 million collectively for the first time for the state to focus on that. When Governor Newsom came in, not only did he up that ante, not only did he devote the State of the State address to one single topic, homelessness, just before the pandemic breaking out, we've seen that now rise to what is $12 billion in commitment from our state leaders and from our state executive. And I think that deserves a round of applause to make sure we attack this on all the fronts that it deserves to be. Folks who might be sleeping in a tent or in a car. Homelessness in its simplest description is trauma meets high rent. The traumas can come from so many places, and the solutions must be an all-the-above kind of approach. Innovative, frictionless bureaucracy to buy motels or to find empty motel rooms and hotel rooms and get people in them. To be able to build the range of temporary housing and permanent supportive housing. To inspire the country who's now looking at California, and I just came back from meeting with our HUD secretary last week and a press conference this morning with the chairwoman, Maxine Waters, in fighting to make sure housing stays in the infrastructure bill. And if I can ask all of us and everybody watching out there to do one thing, is to lobby this week to make sure housing is not cut out of our nation's infrastructure packages, the Build Back Better bill and our bipartisan infrastructure framework. But California still sees it. It breaks our hearts on the streets to see our brothers and sisters, but it lifts our heart to see the action that has been taken. And somebody asked me today, and I'll conclude because we got plenty of speakers. Thank you. KNX is going to carry them all live. And exactly. That's right. Short speeches win elections. But it is difficult for me not to be hopeful. When I see the infrastructure that's now in place, when I see 200 plus tents housed now, people full of tents in places like Venice, when I see the groundbreakings and the 11,000 units of permanent supportive housing coming up, exceeding the speed, the amount, and decreasing the subsidy necessary, I know that we have the dream team we've been waiting for. But it doesn't happen without these things getting signed. It doesn't happen without legislators who grind away making that happen. It doesn't happen without a chief executive who says this will be a priority in the face of criticism, in the face of the difficulty. You have truly been a hero. So muchísimas gracias a nuestro gobernador y a nuestros líderes del asambleísta y Senado porque esta es la lucha de nuestra vida. And with that, let me turn it over to a woman who has served at every level, from community college to state legislature to Congress to being in the cabinet to now being the chairwoman, not just of our Board of Supervisors, but also of our Metro Board, an extraordinary partner and somebody who is getting the job done herself at the local level. Please welcome Hilda Solis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Wow. Well, I can't speak as eloquent as our mayor, but I do want to thank him because he's been a great supporter for the County of Los Angeles. And we're here today because the governor is bringing us some good news. And alongside with getting some good legislation passed and now signed into law, we're going to see a lot of relief, I think, for the 66,000 homeless on any given night that are going to be able to receive the mental health, the substance abuse treatment, the mental health, all that goes into recovery and healing. And it isn't just talk, because some of us have been around for a long time, and talk is talk. But when you actually make things happen, boots on the ground and putting funding into Home Key and Room Key, I'm very proud that LA County and the 1st District stood up. One of the first calls that we had was with the staff of the governors to see how we could work with our cities outside of the city of LA to see how we could bring shelter to many people that were homeless. And I'm happy that some of those cities partook. Not every city is in the same line of reasoning. They still don't believe that it's their problem. But guess what, folks? This governor is strong enough to say that all of us have a right to provide a solution to it, and that's what the legislature is doing. So I want to say thank you to the legislators here. I want to thank them for their courage, but also want to especially thank our governor, who's really done a lot. In the short time that I've known him as a county board of supervisor, he's delivered on whether it's environmental justice, but more importantly on homelessness, on mental health treatment, and helping us build out facilities that we have never seen before on campuses like LAC, USC. Where right now we'll have recuperative bed space developed. And I want to invite him, as well as our cabinet member, Mark Galley, who's very familiar with our campus, to see what is happening, the sprouts and the good things that are coming out of the hard work that we get from the funding from the state as well as the federal government. Because whatever we receive from the state, we can hopefully double down. And then obviously, whatever the county receives, we're also going to see that happen. Just to give you an idea, though, according to the 2020 Greater Los Angeles homeless count, we have about 14,000 unhoused residents living with serious mental illness. And over 5,000 have developmental disabilities, and nearly 11,000 have physical disabilities, and another 15,000 are suffering from substance abuse disorder. I already mentioned that we're going to be building a restorative care village. It's going to be completed in the fall of 2021, providing 96 recuperative care beds and 64 crisis residential beds. Obviously, today we're going to be able to hopefully double down in many, many ways to see that continue, not just in places like LA City or LAC USC, but around the county and around the state of California. So I'm very happy to be a part of this. Alone, just the funding that we've received during the pandemic through the governor, Project Room Key helped us provide 9,000 residents with safety and shelter. And I have to say that that means a lot for us here, since we are also being attacked as members of the board in terms of what we're doing for homelessness. Well, I can tell you, we can't do it alone. We need a partner like the state and the federal government, as well as our governor and the state legislature, to do everything they can to help us. So I'm here just to say muchísimas gracias al gobernador y también a los miembros de la Asamblea, del Senado, y también la administración por el apoyo que están dando a las personas que quedan todavía sin hogares. Pero muchos de ellos tienen enfermedades mentalmente porque viven en las calles. Y sabemos que él va a hacer todo lo más posible para poner los fondos directamente en las áreas más impactadas. Y yo les puedo decir, como presidente de la mesa directiva del condado, que estamos trabajando juntos y vamos a seguir luchando y peleando para los derechos de las personas, especialmente las familias que están muy impactadas. So thank you very much for having me here, Governor. I want to thank you personally, and also want to introduce our next speaker, Assemblymember Gabriel.
Thank you very much, Madam Supervisor, and I want to thank the Mayor, and everybody who is here with us today. I want to begin, as the Mayor did, by reminding everybody that at the beginning of last year, right before the beginning of the pandemic, our governor gave an extraordinary state of the state address. And he broke with convention, and he broke with tradition, and he mentioned one topic, which was our state's homelessness crisis. And I remember that speech really well because the governor spoke with such moral clarity and such urgency and such honesty about our state's homelessness crisis, and he called it what it is, a disgrace. And at the same time, he laid out a bold vision for how to address the homelessness crisis, and also acknowledged that the magnitude of this crisis was overwhelming local efforts to respond to it, and that it was time for the state of California to dress up, to step up and be involved in a much more serious and different way in addressing our homelessness crisis. And the governor's call to action was met with equal resolve from members of the legislature who very strongly applauded him and agreed with him that it is time for the state to do more to increase our efforts around homelessness. And even though a few weeks after that speech, we entered the COVID-19 pandemic, the once-in-a-century, once-in-a-generation public health and severe economic crisis, the governor and the legislature, we didn't take our eyes off the ball. We looked for opportunities to transform this crisis of COVID into an opportunity to address homelessness, to leverage federal dollars. The first thing we did, as the supervisor mentioned, was to use Home Key and Room Key to bring tens of thousands of Angelenos and Californians off the streets quickly and efficiently in a cost-effective manner, and that is something we are very proud has become a national model. And we've also not taken our eye off the ball in the work that we have done in this year's legislative session with the policy and the strategy bills that we have done, but also with the historic budget investments that we have made. And I am so proud that the legislature and the governor in partnership invested $12 billion in this year's state budget to addressing our state's homelessness crisis. This is funding that's going to help create an additional 44,000 new beds and new units for those who are experiencing homelessness. This is money that's going to help people move out of encampments. It's money that's going to provide permanent supportive housing. It is money that is going to assist our veterans who are at risk of homelessness and who are experiencing homelessness. This is meaningful and urgent and extraordinary contribution of resources to this crisis, and it's unprecedented. And we also have the bills that the governor is going to sign today, including some excellent legislation by my colleague, Luz Rivas, to marry those resources with strategy, to make sure that we are addressing this crisis in a holistic way, in a thoughtful way, in a strategic way. And that includes a bill that I'm very proud to have authored, Assembly Bill 977, which is the third leg of the stool, which is accountability for state homeless funding. This will allow us to gather data from across the state, to integrate that data so we have a clear sense of which programs are working, where we need to make adjustments, how we can do better. This will allow us to do data-driven policymaking and make sure that we are getting resources out the door in an effective and efficient manner to help those who are suffering on our streets. And I want to conclude, all of this, there's no silver bullet. I think we all understand that. There are no easy answers, and there's no way that we're going to solve this problem overnight. If we talk about some of the behavioral health issues that we're going to mention today, some of these have their roots in policy decisions that were made before I was born. But I feel very confident that with the legislative work we've done this year, with the historic, unprecedented budget work that we've done and the investments that we've made in the budget, and with the accountability that we are now going to bring to that work, that these are the building blocks to make sure that we are going to make major progress on homelessness and move the needle forward. And so I just want to applaud and thank the governor for his extraordinary vision and leadership, for not letting us take our eye off the ball, with all of the other issues that we have had to deal with trying to keep Californians healthy and safe and deal with wildfires and climate change and everything else, that he has continued to take the lead and push us forward on homelessness. To my colleagues in the legislature like Assemblywoman Rivas, who have continued to push the ball forward. And we are just so grateful, Governor, for your leadership and everything you've done. So thank you very much. Now my privilege to introduce my friend and partner and fellow colleague from the San Fernando Valley, someone who has been a real outspoken champion on issues related to homelessness, Assemblywoman Luz Rivas.
Thank you, and thank you for having me today. I've spent my time in the Assembly over the last 3 years working on homelessness policy that includes restructuring our state's approach to addressing homelessness, identifying homeless children in our K through 12 schools, and establishing ongoing funding to create stability for our local governments. That's why I'm so excited to be here today to say that we have achieved all 3 of those goals, and it's very exciting to be part of it. This year, with the help of my colleagues like Speaker Rendon, Budget Chair Phil Ting, Budget Sub 4 Chair Wendy Carrillo, and my colleagues that are leaders in homelessness policy that are here with us today, Assemblymember Miguel Santiago and Senator Maria Elena Durazo, of course, Mayor Garcetti, Supervisor Hilda Solis, and Council President Nuri Martinez, Mark Ridley Thomas. All of us have fought for and secured over $2 billion in ongoing funding for local governments in this year's budget. Homelessness is deeply personal for me, and that's because over 25% of the children in my old elementary school, in my district where I attended, are considered homeless. I can't imagine going to school and not knowing where I'm going to sleep that night. How could a child be ready to learn? But in California, there are enough homeless children to fill Dodger Stadium 5 times. Okay, let that sink in. Dodger Stadium 5 times. We have to end that. And that's why my bill that will be signed today, AB 27, will identify a process for K-12 schools to identify children that are homeless and also refer them to the services that they and their families need. Finally, I have worked closely with the governor over the last couple of years and my colleagues to reform and restructure the state's approach to addressing homelessness. These reforms include addressing structural issues in our state policy that have created systemic miscommunication and lack of coordination. Well, that also ends today, and that's because Governor Newsom will sign my AB 1220 that establishes the California Interagency Council on Homelessness. The council will be co-chaired by the Secretary of Business, Consumer Services and Housing and the Secretary of California Health and Human Services. The California Interagency Council will now be in charge with overseeing all homelessness programs in our state. Accountability is also desperately needed, and that's exactly what my colleague Jesse Gabriel, that's just spoke, worked on this year. Luckily, we have a governor that has been eager to tackle these tough issues with us. He didn't just kick the problem down the road for someone else to deal with. He took it head on, and together we met the moment. Because homelessness is not a rural problem, it's not an urban problem, it's not just a local problem, it's a California problem. And we're here today to end it. So today I offer my deepest thanks to Governor Newsom, his team, all of my colleagues for all their hard work and commitment. And I'd like, of course, to thank my dedicated staff and especially the Bring California Home Coalition that has been working to make this state a better place to live. Thank you. Yes. And next, I'd like to introduce the Secretary of Business, Consumer Services and Housing, Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Assemblymember, I don't know if you saw that the governor said long name. Yes, it's a very long name. Thank you so much, Assemblymember Rivas, for your leadership, for your tenacity, and it's really great to be in the company of amazing state and local leaders. I am honored and proud to work for Governor Newsom, who has made addressing homelessness comprehensively a top priority. He has also made addressing the housing affordability crisis a top priority. Through his leadership and the leadership of the legislature, we have taken bold steps in support of this top priority with programs like Project Room Key, Home Key, and the Rent Relief Program. This shared leadership has also led to historic levels of funding with over $22 billion to address the housing affordability crisis and to also further our efforts to prevent and end homelessness. Making progress on homelessness towards racial equity requires that all of us working together, doing our parts, and striving relentlessly towards our shared vision, continue to look at data, continue to look at facilitating partnerships, and continue to stay focused on the people that we're serving. Secretary Galley and I are integrating our efforts to support this shared vision with a focus on housing and health. Housing plus health. That is what it will take for us to be able to address the magnitude of the challenges that are in front of us. Our teams are implementing the action plan to prevent and end homelessness, which was adopted earlier in the year by the Homeless Coordinating and Financing Council. Building on this effort, the California Interagency Council on Homelessness will ensure that we can fully seize this opportunity, deliver results, and improve people's lives. Together with state and local leaders, I am confident that we can create the housing and health solutions that are needed to prevent and end homelessness. And now it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Secretary Galley.
Thank you, Secretary Castro Ramirez, and wonderful to be here, Governor. Thanks for allowing me the privilege to continue to serve as part of your team and on hard issues like COVID and our response to COVID. I've for a long time called COVID the great unmasker of inequities and the great accelerant for change. And I think when you look at how the state has addressed homelessness since the beginning of the pandemic, we have seen this acceleration in change. And I just want to take a moment to talk about this place, the Alvarado Care Home. Yes, as the mayor said, where are you? There you are. 38 residents, but let me tell you a story about this place, right? So just before the pandemic, it was going to close, like thousands of other beds across this county, across the state, that were at risk of closing. But because of the innovative programs that Supervisor Solis, you and your county partners have put in place together with the city and the state, we are able to intervene in that closure, come in and actually turn the model around. Create a model where not only do people have a bed to sleep in, thank God, but they have services. I had a chance to chat with Emilio, who's one of the caseworkers here. Yes, a board and care with a caseworker, somebody who steps in and addresses immediate issues, but cares enough to know when is your next appointment for, maybe it's cancer treatment, maybe it's your hypertension, maybe it's your behavioral health treatment. They run groups here, they do things, there's probably a van somewhere that's able to take you to your appointment. And this connection between homelessness as a health issue and frankly, health caring deeply about homelessness, because when it gets so far and deep along, it ends up in our emergency rooms, it ends up in our hospital wards, and that's no place where we want to see the resources spent, and certainly for the individuals who end up in those beds, they want to find a place that's home. So this bold initiative around CalAIM, are thinking about how Medicaid, Medi-Cal in California, starts to transform to address issues that the social drivers of health, of which homelessness is one, I think is bold. And we talk about the bills, and I'm very proud to be part of this bill signing. I want to highlight some of the important things you've done in the budget, Governor, and the legislative colleagues here. But to put a significant amount of resources in the infrastructure, places like this, hundreds of them will be kept alive, brought up from empty plots of dirt across this county and across the state to house thousands of people, not just those who entered homelessness yesterday or the week before, but people who've been on the streets for a very long time, have significant clinical issues, including behavioral health concerns and substance use disorders. And to be able to connect this deep and frankly visible issue of health and housing, I think is really going to put California on a very different track than we've been on before, and being able to make the historic investments in these programs, I think will really allow us, as the mayor you said, find the solutions to end the crisis that we see on the streets. So with that, I get the pleasure to introduce the governor, who I think you know has been a champion throughout so many hard issues, and the creativity and the innovation and you pushing us as your team to make solutions like Project Home Key, Project Room Key, and other things. It's a real privilege to have a chance to introduce you, sir.
Because we don't spend enough time together this last year and a half. But it is nice. Before he became our own Dr. Fauci, Dr. Galley and I had resolved to commit ourselves to address the issue that brings us together here today. And that's to begin to break down these silos and integrate our strategies in a much more comprehensive, dynamic way. In this framework that really is the spirit that brought us, particularly here, of incorporating housing and health is the fundamental shift. And it's a dramatic shift from the status quo. And I want to just acknowledge not only his leadership, Secretary Castro Ramirez's leadership, their willingness as well to serve as co-chairs of this new Interagency Council on Homelessness, puts that not only to the fore, but puts them on the spot in terms of their efforts and the accountability that all of us expect and demand here in the state. I'm also incredibly grateful to be here with Mayor Garcetti. As a former mayor, I know how tough these issues are. And I know about the projects we seed and the programs we seed and the investments that we seed. People want to see dividends overnight. And unfortunately, we live in a situational world where people want to see results immediately. But when it comes to these issues, it takes years and years to see those results. But I was very encouraged because I completely concurred when I read the comments of the mayor that he said in the next 5 years, he expects to see profound and demonstrable changes on the streets of LA. And I absolutely not only believe that, but I know that to be true on the basis of the work that he has been doing, the council's been doing, and thank you, Madam President, Hilda Solis and the County Board of Supervisors is doing. They need to. Let's be honest. This county, this state, we need to do more and we need to do better. We have a unique responsibility because nothing like the homeless crisis exists anywhere else in the United States like it exists and persists here in the state of California. So we have to do more and we have to do better, but we are mindful of that. And we're also mindful of the accountability that people attach to our efforts. And so one of the things that I'll be advancing here today is an effort to do just that, to make real our accountability measures, to actually provide a framework with this new Interagency Council where we will be doing something the state of California has never done in the past. And that is we'll be reviewing local plans and we'll be signing off on local plans. No plan, no money. If the plans are approved and the 6 specific metrics that we lay out as minimum expectations are achieved, the state has actually set aside money to provide 18% bonuses to those governmental jurisdictions that actually produce real results. Again, this is without precedent in California's history. We're coming in not just with sticks, but real carrots, real incentives, using traditional incentives to drive the kind of change and the urgency of that change that all of us expect and all of us deserve. And so we're here in that light. The money, you heard, unprecedented, $12 billion, $3 billion specifically, $3 billion specifically for programs like this. And I want to make the point the Assembly member was making a moment ago. When I had the privilege of being there with you and others, to have the opportunity, Senator and Assembly Member Santiago, others there, to have the opportunity to spend that hour with you in a State of the State on one single subject, we went back and we captured a little bit of the history and frame going back to 1967 in that infamous budget that was submitted by then Governor Reagan. And actually went back and read a lot of it. A great book Luke Cannon wrote about his governorship, his biographer, and about that specific budget and the impact that budget has had for generations, not just here in the state of California, but all across this nation. That's when we began to totally dismantle this system of care that is familiar only to a few of us that have the privilege of being in facilities like this. Our job, our resolve, our goal, and the work we are advancing here, notably today, is to begin to rebuild that system. $3 billion to seed that effort, $5.8 billion on top of that to build on the successful work that the cities and the counties did to look at new strategies to advance that urgency by procuring hotels and motels and other facilities and quickly converting them to housing. A time value, not just of money, but to save people's lives. We were able to, with their leadership, states' visions realized at the local level. We put out the money, they did the work. 6,000 units were procured, brought down in escrow, were transferred through ownership in 5.5 months. 6,000 new permanent housing units. Now that was an investment with your money of $846 million. This year, with their remarkable leadership, we approved $5.8 billion to build off that program. So it's a paradigm change in the past, and people want to hear that. They also want to see that, and we know that, because unless you see it, you're not going to believe it. Because how many press conferences, politicians have always said the right thing on these issues, and we spin around and point fingers and abdicate responsibility. We come and go, and yet things seem to get worse and worse and worse. You're asking us to do more, tax us more, and yet we're not seeing the results. And so we recognize that, and we also recognize that we have to have interventions, particularly to address what's happening on our streets and sidewalks. That's not the entire picture of homelessness, but it's the picture we place so often in our consciousness. And it's marked with deep, deep anxiety and frustration, understandably so. I've had the personal privilege now of being involved in cleaning dozens of encampments in the state of California. Our team has identified 100 high-profile encampments all up and down the state of California, and we've actually attached timelines and strategies to begin to clean them up permanently. It's not easy. In fact, there is a specific encampment in Northern California that we were trying to clean up recently in and around the Berkeley area and the Bay Area, and the judge just put a 6-month pause on our ability to help those folks and to clean up that encampment. I'm not using that as an excuse, but I want you to know that this is challenging. Just ask the mayor and the supervisor. JC, I don't even, well, Judge Carter, he's but we all, sometimes they won. But, you know, so did Judge Carter, right? Raising the consciousness of this issue and demanding all of us to do more and better. And so, look, we're in a different place than we've ever been. I don't want to overpromise how quickly we will see the progress, but I don't want to under-promise how significant the efforts that we are now engaged in are compared to any other time in recent or any other time in historic California history. And so we're here with that spirit and with that expectation to produce results, to demand more of each other, and to coordinate and collaborate in ways we never have in the past. So more data, because of legislation I'm passing, that will allow us to target our interventions to focus on youth and family and children and address the issues in our education system, the opportunity to utilize these dollars with accountability and transparency at play to connect the dots with the state with this new dynamic, more powerful and potent Interagency Council on Homelessness, the strategies we announced yesterday when I signed 27 housing bills, and the Secretary is right. The Secretary's right, it's $22 billion housing and homelessness investment this year. $22 billion, and put that in perspective of things that matter, it's 84,000 housing units. 44,000 homeless, an additional 40,000 affordable housing units will be unlocked by the tax credits and other programs we announced. That's significant. And so this completes that effort. And that's why I'm really honored and proud to be here, and honored and proud to be with so many remarkable leaders that are on the front lines of this work. It's hard. And I just want to thank them for their work and thank the public for sticking by us because there is no other issue. We hear this loudly and clearly. There is no other issue that raises the ire of anger and frustration and just general concern than this issue. And I want folks to know, I want the public to know that not only do we hear those voices, you're right. You're right. And we are here to, get back on the right side of history and all of us getting on the right page, the same page, but moving in the right direction. Shelter solves sleep, housing, and supportive services, board and care homes solve homelessness. It's a paradigm shift, and we're resolved to advance that, not just through legislation, but action. So let's sign these bills and answer any questions that you may have. There's 7 bills total that we're signing. I'm just signing 3 today because you're all getting warm and impatient. Oh, hold on. Let me I'll hand them the authors. But no, we just want to. Thank you, guys. Spread those out.
Thank you, Governor. Josh Haskell, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Wanted to ask you about the eviction moratorium ending. I know that there's protections in place to prevent a tsunami of evictions from happening, but are you concerned about people falling through the cracks and ending up homeless, ending up on the streets during a time where, as you've said, we really can't afford to increase the homeless population?
Of course, we're concerned about it, and that's why we're working with cities and counties up and down the state. I was in Oakland yesterday. They extended their moratorium. As you know, cities and counties are operating differently, and they have those local protections, the state protections, which are still in effect, whether federal protections or not. That ends at the end of this month. But what doesn't end are the protections that extend beyond the moratorium itself. And I think this is important to highlight. When we worked together to put the rental protections in place, we extended beyond the moratorium protections that are the strongest in the United States through March 31st of 2022. Those protections will deny evictions, court order evictions, if a landlord and tenant seek and apply to get the rental assistance that the state has put aside. $5.2 billion that we set aside in rental assistance and $2 billion on utility assistance. Now, here's the good news, but here's the struggle, and it goes to your question. We have distributed, or rather, let me be specific, we have committed and obligated $1.69 billion. That's 100+%, so $190 million more than all the first round funding. We did that before the September 30th deadline, where the Biden administration has made it clear that he expects 65% of that money to have been obliged. We've already done 100%. In fact, he's looking, taking from states that haven't obliged north of 65% and redirecting to states like ours, and we're looking forward to that phone call. That $1.6 billion, though, still is not enough, and that means we have to continue to do more and do better, working with cities and counties and community-based organizations, of which we have 480 that we are employing in some way, shape, or form, and plus or minus. Lourdes will give me the new number, but hundreds of organizations of some stripes, local agencies, and other cities and counties that we've engaged in to more formally distribute those dollars. Work remains in that space. But those protections for people earning less than 80% of AMI are in place, at least through March of next year. And none of us are naive. They're coming back in session in a few months. If we need to iterate and we need to do more, we need to tighten things up, loosen things up, provide more flexibility or more support at local level, obviously we'll be mindful of that and considerate of that.
Governor Pete Demetrio, KNX 1070 News Radio. You've talked about accountability and you've talked about the granting of bonuses to cities that meet certain targets. The one way you do that, though, is to make sure that there's a clear line of communication, that everyone in every government that's involved in the homeless problem knows there's a deadline for when they have to respond to that board and show them what's there. Are you convinced the lines of communication are clear, and are you convinced that the state and local officials will know this is how it's supposed to go? We don't want to be surprised with, gee, we didn't meet our standard.
No, I don't think I'll ever be satisfied with that. Not when you're governing and participating in a leadership role in a state that's larger than 21 state populations combined. Not when you have 58 counties, 476 cities. Not when you have 1,025 independent school boards, and you've got special districts, city administrators, city councils, boards of supervisors. Some are cities and counties. It's challenging. You got regional agencies, not just state, and you got all these federal agencies. That said, what we just did today is profoundly meaningful, because this new agency that we've organized now has the authority and power to sign off on $2 billion of discretionary money to cities and counties. And there are 6 specific measurable goals that must be achieved and those plans must be approved by a council that now 2 senior members of our administration are co-chairing. If there's no plan, there's no money, and if those measurements pursuant to the plan, which are numeric and have dates attached, are achieved, then there's bonuses that'll be advanced. So I'm encouraged by this moment, but we'll see how that process unfolds. I don't want to suggest for a moment that communication and collaboration don't remain a profoundly vexing issue across the spectrum of issues, not just on the issue of housing and homelessness, because jurisdictions blur. Cities and counties at odds. You don't have to talk to these two about that. And I don't mean that LA, I mean all those other 86 or so county cities, or however many there are. And so that just, it remains stubborn. But look, I'll just close on this, and forgive me for being so long-winded on this, but the mayor brought it up, and he's just been a true champion, particularly connecting the federal dots. We just partnered with the Biden administration. I've never heard of this. A state that's not a sparring partner, but a working partner, with this new initiative where we committed to providing 34,000 units of housing to their 100,000 goal. And we actually now have support coming from HUD, technical support. You've got the VA secretary visiting your city. We actually have a strategy for that infamous encampment that you all know well. Yep. More on that soon. I cannot wait to be with the mayor making that announcement to see real results there. This is a breakthrough of collaboration as well at the federal level, which was a big missing piece.
Doug Smith from the LA Times. I thought I heard you say $3 billion is being directed expressly to board and cares. Is that correct? And is that going into individual rescues like this one, or are you changing the structure of the reimbursement scheme, and in what way?
So I'm going to ask Dr. Galley, perhaps can flesh this out, because he made oblique reference, you may have picked it up, on something called CalAIM, which is an order of magnitude change in terms of our funding strategy, financing strategy, and our integration on the issues of housing and health, particularly as it relates to the Medicaid system, the Medi-Cal system that we're reforming. So profoundly, yes, we are moving to radically restructure that financing relationship pursuant to CalAIM. But the $3 billion we put forth are for board and care, for Laura's Law placements, and for programs like this, not exclusively these programs, but programs like this. It's for bricks and mortar, and it's for subsidies, and it's investment on new styles and new strategies with flexibility that will be provided to the counties that want to develop these programs. We don't want it to all be supplemental. That's status quo ante. We want it to be additive, but we are mindful of those financing constraints and relationships. Dr. Galley perhaps can amplify those a little bit more.
Yeah, two distinct things. $3 billion total, 2.2 to the Department of Healthcare Services, funding projects along the entire continuum of behavioral health, everything from inpatient units to lower levels of care that are in communities like this. $800 million to the Department of Social Services, also supporting projects exactly like this one, board and care homes that are available in the community for some of the sickest Angelenos and Californians alike. Then the additional piece around the transformation of the Medi-Cal system through the CalAIM initiative, which really does bring together the bread and butter sort of healthcare services with what we call social drivers of health or social determinants of health, helping us pay for everything like getting people housed, that first and last month rent, some of the move-in expenses, and then all of the support services that help somebody who hasn't been housed in quite some time to stay housed and thrive. So those are two important things, the infrastructure dollars on one hand and the service dollars through our Medicaid program on the other.
Hi, Vanessa Serta with the Epoch Times. Can you further explain the mental health services that will be made available and how the state will reach the homeless who may refuse services?
Well, Dr. Galley was, you could sort of extend the answer you were just advancing. And I should just note on that as Doctor comes up, I've had the privilege, there's a lot of mythology. People say, well, you need to reform, the CEQA, and land use to allow more siting of this. I've signed 15 bills this year just on that. People say, well, you need to reform Laura's Law and conservatorships. I've signed half dozen bills on that. Legislature, you made the point. I love this. We didn't walk away from our obligations a year ago. You guys worked hard, and we worked together. These aren't easy bills when it comes to the issues of conservatorships. I mean, I don't have to bring up the obvious, which is the international headline. And please don't ask me that question. As important as it may be. And that may be the only thing you run tonight, just me saying don't ask that question. But the issue is a challenging one, the 5150 issues, coercion, the whole treatment. I mean, just what's that spectrum? And that is, I will say it, that's the whole Britney Spears question, right? Yeah, but it goes to the fundamental, exactly, but it goes to the fundamental issue of individual liberties, which is at the heart of all of these issues. But with that in mind, those that do refuse these services, there are a lot of well-established mechanisms in place to support those folks, and boarding care homes, of course, are one of them. Sadly, jails are another.
Yeah, Governor, you hit the nail on the head. I would say, having myself, before I had the privilege of moving to the state level, working with the supervisor, with the mayor, in parts of this city on Skid Row, in our jails, in our juvenile detention facilities, seeing that confluence of homelessness, justice involvement, undertreated behavioral health issues. And I think one thing rings true, and this is why those investments in infrastructure, the investments in workforce, the assurance that we're going to have ongoing funding, bringing in federal dollars to support the services that make a difference, that it is hard to talk about some of the issues around conservatorship when those working with these individuals on the streets, when there is a moment to capture them and get them housed, there's no housing. There's no services to be provided. And this strategy to invest in the infrastructure, not just in the buildings and the brick and mortar, which we all focus on and we want to see the ribbon cutting in the building, but the workforce to do the work, the services, the treatment spaces, et cetera. So California's strategy to build that all up, and while we're having the conversation on how to deal with the very challenging issues of conservatorships, I think is very important. But as somebody who's been on the front lines, talked to frontline providers all the time, hard to imagine how you continue to work with people with no answers. So today, these bills, this budget, everything where the train is moving in California is to build up the resources to be able to have meaningful answers to people who are suffering and dying on the streets.
Sorry, guys. Last two questions for me. My friends at City Hall want to hear from you, Mayor, about the vaccine mandates indoors. And then, Governor Newsom, last I saw you, you talked about wanting to do something big with the feds. You've mentioned them multiple times. You said, get back to you after the recall. It's after the recall. I'd love to hear a little more from you about that after the mayor.
Well, thank you. That gives you. It's always good to get the second question because you can think about whatever you're saying. Exactly. Thanks for the question, Ben. And you know, there's been two principles for me as I've led through this pandemic with my colleagues here. One is our first responsibility is saving lives. I don't want to bury another city employee, police officer, firefighter, person who used to greet us coming into the City Hall, I just learned died 2 months ago of COVID. I will not let people die who we can do something to prevent that from happening. And so whether it's the vaccine mandate for our employees or whether it's following the advice of our county when it comes to our public spaces, those will always be the guiding principles. First, save life. Second is to listen to those who are experts. I'm certainly more of an expert than when I started a year and a half ago, but I'm not a public health professional nor a doctor. I look at the evidence, and it seems very clear from folks that unfortunately we hit a wall. We aren't getting the vaccinations that we need, and as such, businesses are suffering. People are being hospitalized. We've become so inured to this that when 25 people a day die in our county, we don't even notice anymore. 25 people a day. We have, in 2 weeks, the equivalent of deaths of a year of homicides. And we say, hey, that's just what we have to live with. Don't take away my freedoms. So people are free not to get the vaccine, but they're not free to endanger other people's lives. So today, my understanding was the City Council There was a procedural vote or procedural motion made by Councilmember Buscaino called withholding, which takes it to a week later and a second reading. But I support the advice that's been given to us by our county when it comes to those spaces where people are at great risk, in our gyms, in our restaurants. And there's a really easy solution to this, which is get vaccinated. When people said, well, I'm waiting until it's a permanent authorization, okay, you have it now. Well, I'm waiting to see what the evidence is. The evidence is clear. Well, I'm waiting to see if there's a difference between being vaccinated and not. Well, there's an 11 times higher chance of being hospitalized and a 91% chance more of dying without a vaccination. So I look forward to them working through those issues if there's whatever tweaks they need to make in a week, listen to business community. But I've been quite surprised by the non-opposition and the quiet and sometimes loud support from business owners. When the county did the bars, every bar owner I've talked to said thank you. This will keep us in business because let's be clear, November and December, remember we heard this last year, there would be a seasonal surge. It was the worst surge of our lifetimes, the darkest days ever. And while a lot more people are vaccinated now and it won't be as bad, I refuse to have a surge because we didn't do whatever possible.
Well, I couldn't agree with the mayor more on that. We are mindful, we should be, particularly here in Southern California, of that late December, early January surge where we were actually having to get body bags brought in from outside of California down here, mobile morgues. And so I applaud all of the efforts that we're seeing up and down the state, local efforts to do more and continue to raise the bar to do better. That said, I am proud that California has the lowest case rate in the United States of America consistently. Again, today, the lowest case rate in the United States of America, the 4th lowest positivity rate. So the state is making progress, but I can assure you, talking to other governors, a lot of folks this is hard for them, and they're always looking for California to take leadership, and we're seeing that at the local level, and we're continuing to see that at the state level, and I can assure you we will be mindful that as we move into the fall of more work that needs to be done and support those efforts. That said, look, on the issue of any big, bold announcements, I was with President Biden just a week or two ago. We had an opportunity to spend a number of hours together on a series of things that he just accomplished and put in the budget for the state of California, specific things he's done as it relates to amplifying our efforts on Home Key, which is now a national model, $5 billion. Those are specific, demonstrable partnerships that the federal government has advanced, not just to the state, but has provided in terms of support to other states across the country. As it relates to specific strategies here, I implied one specifically to the VA. We'll be rolling those out very shortly. There'll be a series of specific examples of that partnership at scale. It is a new day, and I'm very proud of the work the Biden administration is doing to help assist us on the issue of housing and homelessness, the two biggest pre-existing conditions and crises that this state had before this pandemic. With that, I'm grateful to be with all of you and thankful that we were allowed here in this remarkable boarding care facility. Thank you, everybody.